My name's Chanel Johnson, the first full-time Black and Minorities student officer. I'm proud to present our Black History Lecture Series. Robin Walker speaks about the rise and fall of Black Wall Street.
Greetings, this session is called The Rise of Black Wall Street, an Economic Miracle of the 1910s. Some people are wondering, well, who am I? My name is Robin Walker, I'm also known as the Black History Man, and I'm the author of a book called When We Ruled. I'm also the author of something called Black Economic Empowerment. And what I do for a living is I teach Black history and Black studies, which I've been doing since 1992 in various venues up and down the country. In this session, I'll be presenting research from one of my books. The book is called The Rise and Fall of Black Wall Street and the 7 Key Empowerment Principles. In the year 1900, there were 27 all-black towns in the region now called Oklahoma. Many of these people would move to the promised land of Tulsa. The concept of the promised land was coined by a black man called John Williams, and then immortalized by Dr. Scott Ellsworth in his masterly book, Death in a Promised Land, 1982. There was much oil wealth in the area, and this proved to be a magnet and led other industries to boom from the wealth. John Williams, a worker in the Thompson Ice Cream Company, quit his job to open a garage on Greenwood Avenue. By 1912, this evolved into a 3-story building. On the ground floor was a confectionery managed by Lula Williams with a 12-foot fountain and seating for nearly 50 patrons selling ice cream, soda and candy. On the first floor, the Williams family lived. On the second floor, they rented out office space to dentists, to doctors and to lawyers. Here there's a photograph of the 3 of them stepping out, John, Lula and Bill Williams in 1912. And they are riding in a 1911 state-of-the-art car. Now, living larger, 1914, the Williams family built a second building on Greenwood Avenue. The ground floor became the Williams Dreamland Theatre, which featured live entertainment and silent movies accompanied by a pianist. One source claims that the theatre had seating for 700 patrons. The first floor was 21 rooms of boarding house, in other words, 21 rooms of rented accommodation. Now, what I want to do now is talk about the evolution of Black Tulsa, taking the story from 1834 to 1921. The Creek Indians founded what they called Tallahassee sometime after 1834. The first blacks there were their slaves. Now, it may surprise people. Slaves of Indians? Yes, there were Indian nations that held black people in bondage. In the late 19th century, this same place, Tallahassee, was now being called Tulsa Town, and the black populations remained in Indian territory. It's quite possible that the nature of Indian enslavement was different to the nature of European enslavement. So consequently, those blacks stayed, where they would now be known as freedmen. Boosting the black population were an influx of people from Missouri, Mississippi, and Georgia. They founded the Vernon AME Church, African Methodist Episcopal Church, in 1895, and the Macedonia Baptist Church in 1897. So why did these other blacks come? According to the writer Ralph Ellison, many of the descendants of freed slaves considered it a territory of hope and a place where they could create their own opportunities. For Negroes, it had a traditional association with freedom, which had entered their folklore. Moreover, Oklahoma lacked the intensities of custom, tradition, and manners which colored the institutions of the Old South, says Ralph Ellison. Now, Tulsa in 1900, the population was now 1,390 people, blacks making up 5%. Most of the black population at that time were day labourers. Some were servants, others were housewives. But even then, the year 1900, there was a black lawyer, a blacksmith, a stonemason, and a full-time preacher. Where would we be without him? Further evolution, 1905, blacks began to buy land on Greenwood Avenue. In 1906, a black newspaper was established called the Tulsa Guide. In 1907, Oklahoma officially became an American state and became part of the American Empire or Union. However, the white power structure immediately enforced a series of laws to turn Oklahoma into a white-dominated state, to depower the blacks, to depower the Indians. And the issue there was the oil boom in and across Oklahoma. Essentially, the white power structure didn't want that, or too much of it, ending up in black or Indian hands. However, Black Tulsa by now had 2 doctors, 1 barbershop, and 3 grocers. By 1910, Tulsa grew to a population of 18,182 people. Blacks now made up 10% of the population. That same year, 1910, saw the birth of the first black trade union. They were called the Hod Carriers Local number 199. They existed to protect the interests of black bricklayers, plasterers, and masons. So why did people come to Tulsa? Mabel Little, a 17-year-old, arrived in Tulsa in 1913. This is what she remembered. Black businesses flourished. I remember Huff's Cafe on Cincinnati and Archer. It was a thriving meeting place in the black community. You could go there almost any time, and just about anybody who was anybody would be there or on their way. There were also 2 popular barbecue spots, Tipton's and Uncle Steve's. J.D. Mann had a grocery store. His wife was a music teacher. We had 2 funeral parlours owned by mortician Sam Jackson and Hardell Radston. Down on what went by the name of Deep Greenwood was a clique of eateries, a panorama of lively dance halls, barber shops, theatres glittering in the nightlight, and a number of medical and dental offices. Here there's an image of the funeral car of Jackson Undertaking Company, 1921. And this is possibly the same Sam Jackson mentioned by Mabel Little. Now, Tulsa in 1913 was now, part of it was being called Deep Greenwood. Other people calling it the Negro Wall Street. And this was the area of Greenwood Avenue. The white community began calling it Little Africa. An organizer of the National Negro Business League, the organization founded by the very great Booker T. Washington, called it a regular Monte Carlo. By 1913, there was another black newspaper called Weekly Planet. So what did anyone else think? Mary Parrish left Rochester, New York, to come to Tulsa in 1918. She gave her reasons as follows. I had heard of this town since girlhood, and of the many opportunities here to make money, but I came not to Tulsa as many came, lured by the dream of making money and better myself in the financial world, but because of the wonderful cooperation I observed among our people, and especially the harmony of spirit and action that existed between the businessmen and women. On Greenwood, one could find a variety of business places, which would be a credit to any section of the town. In the residential section, there were homes of beauty and splendour, which would please the most critical eye. The schools and many churches were well attended. Now, Tulsa in 1921 had a black population of 11,000 people out of a total city population of 98,874. They had a black public library. They had 2 black public schools, the Paul Lawrence Dunbar School and the Booker T. Washington School. 3/4 of black children school age were now in school. There were 2 black newspapers, the Tulsa Star and the Oklahoma Sun. They had 13 churches, one with an attendance of 950 people and cost a staggering $135,000 to build and furnish. Again, this is $135,000, $1921. There was a black hospital. There were 3 fraternal lodges, the Masons, the Knights of Pythias, and the Independent Order of Oddfellows. Here's a photograph of the Booker T. Washington School, taken in 1921, and it's worth inquiring, what did the black youngsters study there? Well, there was the freshman class where they studied Latin, English, algebra, drawing, domestic science and art, manual training, ancient history, vocal music. There was the sophomore class where they studied Latin, English, geometry, domestic art, drawing, medieval modern history, economics, music, domestic science and manual training. The level above was the junior class, English, algebra, commercial arithmetic, drawing, manual training, business spelling, chemistry, English history, civics, domestic art, domestic science, vocal music. And there was the highest class, senior, where they did English, physics, geometry solid, typewriting, vocal music, domestic science, manual training, American history, psychology, trigonometry plane, bookkeeping, drawing, domestic art and shorthand. All of the classes were required to take part in some form of athletics. There were other businesses. There was a shop selling feed and grain. There was one undertaker's with caskets ranging from $50 to $1,000 with a $10,000 limousine. There were 2 garages stroke filling stations. There were 6 estate agents stroke loan companies stroke insurance companies. There were 5 builders stroke contractors. There were 2 dressmakers. There were 4 shoemakers stroke repairs. 10 tailors. There was 1 printer with $25,1921 worth of equipment. There were 12 barbers, 3 hairdressers stroke beauty salons. There were 5 cleaners stroke hatters stroke dyers. There were a number of plumbers. There was 1 upholsterer, 2 photographers, 1 jeweller, and 15 GPs and surgeons. Greenwood Avenue was the Negro Wall Street, also Archer Street. It had 2- and 3-story buildings, including a dry goods store. Black Tulsa had 2 in total. Groceries and meat markets. Black Tulsa had 41 in total. Confectionaries. Black Tulsa had 4 in total. Restaurants. Black Tulsa had 30 in total. Billiard halls. Black Tulsa had 9 in total. 11 boarding houses. 4 hotels. Black Tulsa had 5 in total. 2 theatres, of which 1, according to one source, had seating for 700 patrons. In addition, there were doctors, lawyers and professionals. Here's a photograph of an old advertisement for the Satisfactory Tailing Company, 418 East Archer Street. Again, this is taken from a 1921 source. Now, the side streets were the illegal and semi-legal businesses. These included the chop joints, the nightclubs, the brothels, the gambling parlours and the speakeasies, all throbbing to the sounds of jazz, which is Black America's classical music. The chop joints were supposedly places that sold a type of illicit alcoholic drink associated with the Choctaw Nation, one of the Native American nations. There were other institutions selling illicit whiskey. There were gangsters and hoodlums. Some of the poor blacks lived in the side streets in shanties. Interestingly, other poor blacks lived in the white areas in quarters located on their employers' lots. In total, one source states that 600 businesses flourished in Black Tulsa, illegal and legal businesses. Black Tulsa came alive from Thursday evening through the weekend as blacks from the white areas flocked into Black Tulsa to party. At least 3 blacks had fortunes of $1 million each. One source goes further and claims 6 blacks had such large fortunes, some with private planes. Several blacks had fortunes of $25,000 to $500,000. It became fashionable to dangle $20 gold pieces from a chain. This is a type of watch. One black shoe shiner, Joe Heaton, is known to have had 3 such gold pieces. Simon Berry operated a bus, taxi and garage service that was turning over $500 per day. He owned his own plane. He also owned a Royal Hotel in Greenwood District. So let's get some opinions. One website said, Tulsa's progressive African American community boasted some of the city's most elegant brick homes, well furnished with china, fine linens, beautiful furniture, and grand pianos. G.A. Gregg, an important official in the YMCA, remembered, the Tulsa colored people in every sense of the word were building a modern, up-to-date business city. Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, the great African-American social scientist, said, I have never seen a colored community so highly organized as that of Tulsa. The colored people of Tulsa had accumulated property, have established stores and business organizations, and have made money in oil. So let's do some analysis. It is interesting to compare the achievements of 11,000 black Tulsans and perhaps 2 million black Britons. Is there a black-owned public library in Britain? What about the black-owned hospital? 11,000 black Tulsans created 2 public schools. How many such public schools have 2 million black Britons created? What about the bus and taxi services, garages, estate agents, insurance companies, restaurants, theatres and hotels? 11,000 black Tulsans created 3, some say 6 millionaires, some owning their own planes. Remember that $1 million in 1921 dwarfs $1 million today. How many black Britons own their own plane? The key question is, what excuses are we going to make for ourselves? Now, the trajectory. The story of African entrepreneurship in the Western Hemisphere begins with Paul Kofi, who flourished between 1779 and 1818. He owned 6 ships and transported thousands of African Americans back to Africa. In 1900, African Americans owned 40,000 businesses. In 1908, African Americans owned 55 private banks. During this same period, we get the first black millionaires. R.R. Church made it in property, and Madame C.J. Walker made it in hair care products. By 1925, African Americans owned 103,870 businesses. And the story ends with the likes of Oprah, who is the richest woman in American entertainment, and Janet Jackson, who at one time was the 3rd richest woman in American entertainment. And this concludes the session. If you'd like more information, consult my book, The Rise and Fall of Black Wall Street, and the 7 Key Empowerment Principles.